Happy Thursday, everybody. Um, Hope everyone had a good day yesterday. There wasn't anything that was, dropped in my wheelhouse yesterday. So, like I keep telling you, I don't just go and do stuff because it's another day and I have to do stuff. That's not how I want to operate this thing. And it's not how he's been having me operate. So, but today, he did remind me of something that I had written down, and it was stemming from that day, Thursday, moving the piano. Um, and I'll give you a little background to this before we get started. Um, I've known Brother Steve now for about, my goodness, 23 years, 22 years now, and it never ceases to amaze me the amount of treasures that I can get unearthed by just talking with him. Um, we had a conversation. Now he's a wealth of information too when it comes to just life because he's lived a long time and he's done a lot of things. And so we were driving out to drop off this piano, and uh, we had to pass by these wind farms. They're the massive windmills that they create to try and create power. And after we passed them, we came across these fields, and they were these farmer farmlands thing. And so he was talking to me about the various kinds of farming methods, um, and how they would take a harvest in, and the remaining stalks that were there they would cut down even further, almost about a 6 inch 5 inch from the ground, and just cut it down to that low and grind up whatever was left, all the remnant pieces from the harvest that didn't get taken, and they would grind it finally, put them on a different section of land, use a tractor and just kind of level it down, press it down, and then they would cover it, and um, it would ferment. It would ferment. And once it fermented and kind of decayed a little bit, per se, they would then use that as feed for the animals during the winter. So they would just keep reusing instead of having to buy food. They would just use what was unused, reuse it for the food, and so that everything was used. Now, during that conversation, he also told me about the kinds of farming that they did, and one of them was dry land farming. And it intrigued me because I used to be really into watching rice farmers in Indonesia and in the Asian countries where it was just all wet. And man, it used to just like they would be bent over for days. That was the one I was watching. They just be going at it. And lo and behold, the differences between the two was all based on what they were growing and where they were growing it. So the dry land farming happens when you have very limited water supply. And they would depend on the changes of seasons to grow their crop. And they would rotate their crop based on how much rain was happening, how much cool weather it would have, how hot the weather would be. And they would rotate the ground based on that. So they would adapt to the climate that they were in. Now, the crazy thing is that it was very fickle, right? It was very fickle. So you would have some days you'd have to say, okay, well, we may not be able to plant this day, and sometimes you'd be able to plant that day, and sometimes you'd be able to harvest, but you can't harvest, and it would delay or it'd be enhanced. And so their income would be very fluctuative. So you have one year that have an abundance of income, and then the next year they may have no income, and in some years they have loss. Some years they'll have such an abundance that they can compensate for 4 or 5 years of no harvest. The craziest part to all of it that he was that just it just kind of became this realization for me. When you allow for God to do what by nature God does, whether it be wet or dry, when you depend on him to do what he's supposed to do, the harvest happens. And even if it doesn't happen that way, it does not reflect on him. There's so many other factors that we don't like to take into consideration. In this particular case, I was in awe at this particular thing. The dry lands and the dry farming has a specific kind of crop that will respond to dry land farming. Okay, there's no way for you to do a rice field the way they do in Asian countries in a dry land farming situation. It's specific to that particular thing. Too many of us want to be something that we're not, or he's not building us for, if that's the best way to put it. We want to be a rice field in an arid area, and you're supposed to be doing something that's built for that area, but you want to do something else because somebody told you we should be doing something else, but you're not talking to him to see if you're dry land or wetland. You have not even remotely gone to him to find out if the reason that you're not contributing to the kingdom in your estimation is because you are functioning outside of where you're planted, or trying to function outside of where you're planted. You see, I looked at it, and this was the first thing that my brain came up with. This is me, right? I knew this wasn't him. I want to be what I want to be, right? And so this wetland and dry land situation that he brought to my mind, I was like, man, come on, Brett. I want to be this, but it feels like all I get is this. I want to be wetland, but all I get is dry. Well, maybe, perhaps it is because I'm still placing my expectation on Christ and expecting him to fulfill my expectation, not the other way around. Everybody keeps saying, well, what's my purpose in life? What do I do? What's my calling? The reason you can't figure out your calling is because you're not the one calling you to your calling. It's him. And if you try to function in your own mindset of what your calling is, you might end up completely and utterly failed at it. But not just that, you'll end up mad. You will end up mad, and you'll end up with a crop that doesn't yield what you think it's supposed to yield, or you might end up with a completely different crop. And then you get mad at that too, because that's not the crop you're wanting. There are so many times that we do not allow God to supply. The dry farmer has to be at the will of the weather. He's at the complete and utter will of the weather. He can't control it. He can't coerce it. He has to function around it. Whatever it allows him to do is what he can do. Whatever the weather allows for him to do, he has to do. Even if it means I want to harvest now, it's not ready, and the weather doesn't allow for it, you can't harvest. And if you tried to harvest before, you could ruin your entire crop, the entire season, and possibly multiple seasons if you harvest too soon. If you harvest too late, you ruin the seasons. You have to be so dependent on the weather and be attentive to the weather. The same way with the wetlands. You can't leave it too long and you can't pull it too soon. Both depend on the region, and there's nothing that they can do outside of it. Every farmer knows this, right? You can want all you want, but if the weather and the soil don't agree with you, you're done. You can put your hand in it too much and end up ruining something that could actually be potentially be amazing. But we intervene. We love to jump in. We want what we want. This happens when people think that they have, say, a talent, okay? I have a skill. And God needs to use that skill because that's the one I have. I don't know if you realize this, right? Yes, he imparts a whole bunch of skills to people. That doesn't mean he's going to use your skill to his benefit. Your skills are for you, they can definitely benefit you. But what he may want may not include your. In fact, he may give you a whole brand new set of skills that you've never had before, so that you have to still depend on him because it's brand new to you. I think today, unfortunately, Christians have become so self sufficient that they're no longer dependent on God. He is simply there. He is there. He is the one they pray to. Uh huh. And he is the one that blesses them. They know that. Depending, though, I don't know about all that. I don't know if we want to depend on him. I mean, I work, so I depend on my body to get up in the morning. So I do certain things to get my body right so I can go to work. I'm depending, my family is depending on me. They're depending on me. Look, I get, because I've been there multiple years in my life, where I feel like I am the be all and end all of what happens to my family and what happens to me and what happens here and what happens there. But if I truly understood that I don't even control my next breath, how am I in control? You see, the farmer thinks he controls the dry lands because he plants it, right? And he harvests it. But he's not in control because the real control happens in the weather and he can't control that. He is completely dependent on everything happening outside of his control. So technically, he's second in command. He can only do what the weather allows him to do. And the sooner he understands that the weather is the one in control of all of this, he can easier plant, easier harvest, easier plan. And it takes a whole lot of burden off of him because if the crop fails after doing what he's supposed to do based on the weather, he's not going to be like, man, I could have done, he can't do anything about it. It was the weather. And he'll be fine because next year the weather might be different. But after a while, patterns start to emerge in the weather. Because of the area, because of the type of ground, there are patterns that start to emerge. And you start to see, if I only do this, I can start anticipating, albeit not to 100%, but I can anticipate this at this time, at this harvest, will yield me a good year. And the farmer starts to base his entire calendar on what the weather offers him. He doesn't plan his calendar and then expects the weather to fall in line. Same thing with the wetlands. So why is it that in nature that happens, but when it comes to our walk, we don't want to depend on the one person that controls everything? We don't ever, I say, I'm going to build my entire day around what God is doing. No, I plan my day and expect God to fall in line with my day. I got up this morning and I know I could have slept in today because I had no school runs to make, but my body's already on that clock. So I got up. So I sat there and I was listening to the book of Matthew. And the topic today kind of blended in with Matthew 13, albeit on a different scale, but I'll show you the connection that it popped in my head with, okay? In Matthew 13, it says, on the same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the sea, and a great multitudes were there gathered to him, so that he got into a boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. Then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places, and they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But others fell on good ground and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, growing up, that parable was always about the soil, wherever the seed landed, right? And I was always told, this was about people and how people accept the word, and um, their hearts are not, some of them are stone hearts and some of them are good soil. You've heard that's theory before, right? But you do realize that in only one occasion, the seed didn't do anything, and that was when the birds ate it. It didn't even have time to germinate or nothing. Didn't spring, didn't actually get planted, nothing. It just fell, got ate. What is the one common denominator in all of the scenarios? The seed, right? Okay. The seed will do what the seed can do when it meets with soil, good, bad, or indifferent. It'll still germinate, even if it's thin soil. It doesn't have very much root. It still pops up. It'll die, but it still pops up. The one thing that I had not seen anybody talk about was the sower. It was a sower. Now, if you realize, it didn't say he planted them. You realize this? Listen carefully. Watch this. It says, then he spoke many things to them in parables, saying, behold, a sower went out to sow. His entire purpose was to go sow. Okay? Before I go back, I mean, did he though? Did he? I'm going to read it again. All of the other scenarios that he put out there, did he sow them? Just try and remember the story. Did he sow them? Okay, you think so. Watch this. Okay, just watch this. And as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside. That wasn't sown, was it? There was a spot where he was sowing, definitely sowing seed, right? He was definitely sowing in a specific spot. But as he was sowing, Some fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places. He didn't say plant. Again, again, are they planted or did they fall there? Did he plant them or were they just falling aside? Was the seed just falling on the floor? Was it being sowed? They fell, right? The seeds just fell there. I'm going to get to what I mean here in a second. The sower sowed, and as he sowed, some seed fell. I hope you understand the difference between sowing and seeds just falling. What is involved in sowing? Let's start there. What's involved in sowing a seed? What has to happen first? There has to be an uprooting of dirt, right? There has to be some sort of initial damage to the earth. Okay. Again, though, Richie, they did not go to the specific place he wanted it to go to. Even if you were to go to the semantics meaning spread, even if, okay, listen carefully, even if there has to be a direct intent to place the seed where they are. Okay. So let's go with your analogy, Richie, that it is spread. Okay. What sower goes out and just willy-nilly tosses seed around? There has to be a direct purpose, location, intent to the spreading of said seed. Is there not? He doesn't just come in and just grab and walk across as he walks and just does this and hopes for the best. Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. Birds came, devoured them. Some fell on stony places and where they didn't have much earth. Sprang up immediately, but because there was no depth, the sun came, burned it, done. No root. Some fell on thorns, sprang up, choked it out. And others fell on good ground and yielded a crop. Some hundredfold, 60-fold, 30-fold. There are three factors that I was never shown when I was reading this as a youngster. That the sower has an intent. The sower intentionally went out to sow. That was the first thing I was never spoken to about. There was always an emphasis on the types of soil that happened. It was never on the sower. We've always brushed over the sower did this, and then fine. So now get to the seeds. But the sower went out with intent. The sower had to know the seed. A sower knows the seed. Anyone who's going out to farm and to plant has to know what they're planting. And the third thing that I was never really spoken to about in this story was that as much as the soil was the topic, the seed did what the seed was supposed to do. It fell. The seed fell. Now, the seed can only do its full fruition in something that will accept it. good soil. In some cases, it falls places where it looks like it's accepting it, but it doesn't. And in some cases, it'll fall there and it doesn't want it, and birds will eat it. You see, we go out to do all kinds of things. We set out. We set out. Now, if that farmer or that sower got irate at the seeds, it'd be misplaced. You're right. His irritation would be misplaced. If he got irate at the soil, it'd be misplaced. You know who he could get irate at? He could get irate at himself for willy nilly spreading the seed, though, and not being very specific. Even though the spread yielded something, he could be upset at himself for not spreading it correctly. And I understand that's not the point of the parable. I'm just pointing out something to you. The same way that the point of the parable is about the word taking root. Many people do not want to admit to this one thing, that the only person that is responsible for the growth is not the person, it's the seed. The seed is what's going to come out. Now, what happens is some people will take a seed and say, this is what I'm supposed to yield, but it's not anything remotely close to what the seed is supposed to yield at all. You ever notice that? Like some people will say, I'm good soil and I'm growing in Christ, but they're not even yielding anything close to the seed that was supposedly fall in their soil. Nothing close to it. Can't blame the seed, because that's not what fell. You actually might have been one of the people that the seed fall on the ground and the birds ate it, and you think you're germinating. So how do you know for sure that you're yielding what you're supposed to yield and it's of Christ? How do you know? The only way for you to know is to know the seed. You have to know the seed. And the seed can only spring up in certain locations properly. The same way the dry land farmer has to know what will grow and not grow, the wetland farmer has to know what will grow and not grow. And he can only depend on the things that he cannot control. All these things you can control. You can control when you decide to talk. You can decide when you go out, and you can decide all that. The one thing you cannot control is the yield. But what if you're the one that's being planted into? What if the seed that was planted in you, the gift that was given to you, the expectation of growth that is expected of you, you don't want? You want something else. I have bad news for you. The only thing that'll happen after that point is dead seed. You may see something pop up and it'll disappear. Good soil has nutrients. Good soil allows for the plant to feed. Good soil allows for the plant to break through. Good soil allows for it to actually become into the earth, spread its roots. That's what good soil allows. You realize that good soil isn't the plant. The good soil just allows for the seed to do what the seed is supposed to do in the soil. You can't control the gifts of God. You cannot control it. It is not for you to control because you didn't give it. We are required to allow the seed to germinate. This is what makes the soil good. The rocky soil rejects, the thorny soil chokes. Good soil allows the seed to do what the seed does. The soil doesn't tell the seed, oh, you can't be that kind of seed. I'm going to make you a different seed now that you're in my soil. That's not how that works. The same way, the exact same way that the dryland farmer and the wetland farmer have to be conducive to what their environment is, not to what they want. If you want something that doesn't come from wetlands, you can't be planting it in the wetlands. If you want something that doesn't come from drylands, you can't be planting it in the dryland. You pick the seed that fits the area. Any farmer that expects a completely different crop from what they're growing isn't a good farmer. God plants a seed and expects that seed, because its nature reflects him, to yield something for him and his kingdom. And it will show itself regardless, but it can only take full root in soil that will allow it to do so. The other soils did not allow for that seed to do its full work. It didn't stop the seed from being the same seed. The same seed fell out everywhere on all the grounds. There's an intentional sowing. It's easy. There are some that you intentionally plant into. Am I wrong? You have the word of God and you intentionally go to talk to somebody about it. So you've just planted the seed. Consider it like this. A residual seed would be one that falls off from the side, would be after that person leaves your presence. They're talking to somebody about the same thing that you just talked about, but the other person hasn't really taken hold of it because they're not willing to listen. That's like a scattered seed. Same seed, scattered somewhere else. Won't take root. And on occasion, it'll fall off of somebody that you just planted into and it will grow. So, what do you plant? Do you plant doctrine? No. Do you plant a certain church belief? No. Do you plant a tradition? No. You plant the seed. Again, you have to know the seed. The seed is what? The word. If you don't know the word, and the word is who? You see how easy it is to just, everybody wants to plant doctrine. That's where they go first, is straight doctrine. What my church preaches, what my church. And like I said before, you don't have one, so I don't know how you get to do that. But it is what the tradition of man said. This is what the Baptists say. This is what the Lutherans say. This is what this is. What this is. That's what they plant. Then they want, even we go so far, I'm going to have a new church plant out there. But the word is only one person. And he has a name, and it's not Lutheran. He has a name, and it's not Protestant. He has a name, and it's not Baptist. The word that you plant, which is the seed, has a name. And it's Jesus. You have to give them Jesus. You preach Jesus Christ and Him crucified. The seed will do what the seed does. The soil will either allow for it or not. See, what we try to do is this: we want to dictate everything about the seed, including its nature. And we don't want anything to do with what kind of soil the seed falls on, but we want to dictate the seed. So we change the seed's nature in our minds anyway. Well, you see, what I'm planting is this particular kind of seed. Even though I was given one kind, what I actually want this seed to do is this. So I'm going to plant it like that. If Christ said He is the Word made flesh, which is what He is, right? That's what, unless I have read the book wrong, and unless I deciphered wrong, unless I heard wrong, last time I saw, Christ was the Word made flesh, right? There isn't anything that's been made that has been made that hasn't been made through Him. Am I right there too? You can tell me if I'm wrong at any point here. The Word was the Word was God. So far, so good, right? Good. If that be the case, and we're supposed to be spreading the Word of God, which is His seed, that's the seed, and the Word will come to fruition because it is who it is, Christ, then you have to offer them Jesus. Not religion, not denomination, Jesus. So you are the sower, intentionally sowing. You know it, you know the seed, you even know the area that you're planting in. Take, for instance, this. You're in a heavily gang-related area. Okay? Heavy gang activity. And hardly any of these people graduated high school. Let's say a majority of them have a 7th grade education. Knowing the soil that you're living among, okay, you now have your seed. You can now know how to plant the seed. The seed will grow, it'll grow. You just have to know the soil, okay? You can't go to the 7th grade education guy and speak master's thesis to him. Won't work. They won't get it. Won't get it. But you can speak something very simple. And that's what he said his gospel is. Did he not? And it can get to the simplest to the most complex mind. But you know what stops people from actually reaching people? We want to present Christ the way we want to present Christ. And everybody better accept him that way. Ironically, he already told you who he is, how he functions. So present that. Present that. But you know why you can't? Because you don't know the seed. You have your own version of your idea of the seed, but it's not the seed. I get maybe I might be complicating this and I might be thinking too hard about it, but I don't know that I really am. Because I do know that underneath concrete and ground, rock and stuff, there is dirt. And so there is an option and a way for it to grow. But after the seed is planted, it's not for me to figure that out. That's outside of my control. You get it? That's not my concern. And I also can't, just like the farmer, he's going out and doing his sowing. If it fell one way and fell the other, once it's down, one, I can't control the soil, and two, I can't control the seed. But I plant. I go out to sow. What the sower knows is the seed. What the farmer in the wetland knows is the seed. What the farmer knows in the dry land is the seed. And he's fully dependent on the location that he's in to make sure that that seed germinates. The only person that brings that seed to fruition is Christ. The seed, in its nature, will do what the seed does. The farmer, the person planting it, the sower, does not then, after putting the seed down, dropping the seed, it falling to the wayside, go and does surgery on the seed for it to pop out of its thing. And then after days, after day, after day, goes in to try and pull this plant out of the seed. That's not what the sower does. The sower knows that the seed will do what the seed does in the soil that accepts the seed. The same way that the dry and the wet are dependent on the environment to do what the environment's supposed to do, and they cannot control that. They don't attempt to. They work within the confines of the area, they work within the confines of the soil, and they work within the confines of the seed. They do not try to overextend, they do not try to overdo, because if they do, they ruin the entire crop. What you see today is a whole lot of people trying to define the seed in their own way. And then they go and they try to make sure that the seed does this and the seed does that. And then they title the seed, and then they say, well, ho, you don't look like the kind of seed that we want. That they make the seed the people instead of the seed being Christ. Then they try to modify the seed. Any modification makes it no longer him. Manipulation is not him. He has a name. Jesus is the seed. He's the word. And the word will grow. The word will break free of many things if you just let the word do what the word's got to do. Your job is to sow. The question is, do you? Do you know the seed? Do you know the nature of the seed? Do you go out and intentionally sow said seed? And then, do you allow for the seed to do what the seed does? I was going to get there, but you jumped me. I was going to get exactly to that point. One may plant, one may water, and one sees the increase. But wherever you are, you have only one. We all share one seed. One. Just one. He asked you to get to know it. Before you can do anything else, you have to know him and what he requires. And if you don't know that, how are you going to identify anything that comes from whatever you plant? If okay, if I get up one morning and I'm going to plant walnuts and I just grab some seeds, I have no idea what walnut seeds look like. I have no clue. None. I just grab it, run, and I throw something in the ground. And 5 years later, I'm expecting walnuts, a tree to grow. Whee! But it's not. I don't even know the seed. Heck, I don't even know if walnuts have seeds. I don't know any of that stuff. I'm just grabbing stuff, throwing it in the ground, and expecting walnuts. Or somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, here, I'm going to give you some seeds. You know what? Those are sunflower seeds. Just plant them. You'll get some sunflowers. Go ahead." And I don't do anything to see whether or not that seed is what it says it is. I just run with it. Yeah, okay, cool. And I'm going and I'm planting, bang, 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 bang. And none of this stuff comes up sunflowers. What's going to happen? I'm going to get mad and I'm no longer going to plant. He asks you to know the seed, know what it yields, know how it operates, know that you're out of control of it. You can't control the seed. You just ask to plant. His word is very efficient. And far too many times we get in the way of that efficiency in our own life. We allow birds, we allow thorns, we allow the sun, we allow trampling, simply because we do not accept the seed and let the seed do what the seed does. If you're in a place right now where your mindset about Christ is in dismay and you are seeing yourself in this darkened light, like you just can't find a way out. I'm in desperate need of some sort of a upper. I'm just so dejected. I'm always angry, or I have some issue. You see yourself as that. That's how your life is right now. I have only one question for you. Is that Christ? And I know it may seem like a too simple of a question, but is that the seed? You see, we like to say God's not here, or I can't see God right now, and that's what all the new mantra stuff is. I feel so distant from Christ, and I feel if something is planted in the ground, the soil can't feel distant from the plant. The soil cannot feel distant from the plant. They're one. What would be an example of one watering the seed after it's planted by someone else? Can you hear me now? Is that better? Can you hear now? Can you hear now? Is that any better? Okay, good. To answer that question, let me find it again. Say, for instance, that you go to a 20-year class reunion, high school reunion. Okay. Some of you may not be 20 years outside of high school. Um, I only have 2 more years before I'm 20 years out of high school. That's crazy. Wow. Okay. High school reunion. Okay. And during your time at high school, you were a believer. And you had this one person that all you did was, God really loves you. And he sent his son to die for you. You knew this in your soul. And you told, okay, you told everyone you could that this is who Christ was. But nobody really showed any change. 20 years later, here they come at the reunion and they find you and they said, you once told me about Christ. And I may not have got it then, but years after you spoke to me about Christ, a situation happened and I met this other person and they too told me about the same Christ. And I was in a place where I was parched. And that refreshed the memory of what you said. And I decided to pursue Christ. But then years later, someone else came and solidified something that I had been yearning to hear. And I fully gave myself over to Christ. And I just wanted to thank you for planting that seed. You didn't witness the watering, you didn't witness the harvest. All you did was planted. You have no idea whether or not it fell on stone, on thorn, or good soil. You don't know. But you did plant. My job is to plant. And if I know the seed, if I know the seed, the only person that can lead me to somebody needing watering would be Christ. And the only way I could know how to water is if I know the phases of the seed. I have to know the seed. I water. Someone else comes. Their turn is to harvest and bring the whole thing up. They have to still know the seed so they can recognize when it is full. You still have to know the seed. I don't have to care about the ground. That's God's job. It is outside of my control. I have to be like a dry land, wetland farmer. I let the land dictate everything else. But if you don't know the seed, what are you planting? If you don't know the seed, how much water does it need? If you don't know the seed, when is it ready? You don't know any of that because you don't know what the seed yields. You have not. In fact, you can decide whatever you want and then decide you're doing something for the kingdom and you never knew he said this. Didn't I do this? Didn't I do that? Didn't I? But you didn't know me. You have no concept of how it was that I was supposed to be functioning. You don't even know that. All these parables that he gave us, all of them leaned on knowing. My sheep know my voice. He keeps telling us to do this. Come to the knowledge. We don't want to. We're told to conform to his image. We want him to conform to ours. We want him to be on our timing when he told you to be on his. That'd be just as dumb as the dry land farmer getting mad at the crops because he planted rice. You were the one that decided what you didn't want to know the soil. You didn't want to know what you're planting. You just did stuff, and you were hoping for some kind of result. And when you don't get the result, you blame both the rice and the ground. No, that's on you. You didn't take the chance and the time to know rice and what rice grows in, which is wetland, and you didn't take the time to know the soil at all. None of that. You didn't even take that at all. You didn't take none of it into consideration. You didn't care. You had your agenda. Because you wanted what you wanted. You didn't want to know the seed. This entire walk hinges on you and I knowing Christ. It hinges on that. All of it hinges there. Because what you know of him is what you will walk in. What you don't know, you walk blindly. So, yeah, thrive where you're planted and plant where you are. Thrive where you're planted and plant where you are. Okay? Cool. This afternoon, I'll be going live on Savage Patriots. Again, I'm going to be putting some information out there. It is not some trending story. It is one here about local stuff. So I understand there may not be a large viewership. Um, However, I think it's essential that it be done. Um, it'll be at 5 o'clock Eastern, and then Too Strong will be live tonight to discuss the Abercrombie and Fitch fiasco going on. Yeah, local stuff like in Washington State, local stuff. So it will affect you, Linda, for sure. If your little girl does any sports, it will affect her if she does sports. So if it'll be on all of them, it'll be on YouTube and Rumble and Facebook. So um so tune into that. I think I'd mentioned it before because it had to do with my 14-year-old and the cronyism that was happening here, and I decided to let their system run its course and all the appeals and all. Remember I talked to you about that? Well, the appeals turned out the exact way I thought it would. And so now it's my turn to operate in the way I wanted to handle it to begin with. So here I am going to handle it today. And no, I'm not going to go back to my old self. But you will be getting a dose of the Savage Patriots, Marlon. And I don't mean a non godly person. I'm just saying a very adamant, directed about a topic that is not about the church. Okay, that's what I mean. So we'll talk about that at 5 o'clock Eastern. And then we'll talk to, yes, surely I did. I have still a lot of reading to do on it. So because I have that live tonight, it probably won't be the weekend before I get to fully fleshing out what you emailed. So just give me some time on that. So we'll be live tonight on Too Strong. And if you saw the take that we had on Savage yesterday, it'll be a little more fleshed out today because I'll have some time to fully research a couple of the things. Because during the show is when a lot of things popped up. And so now I'm going to run all of it. And we do have the court paperwork. So that's the other thing too. So we didn't have that yesterday. So we'll have that on Too Strong. Okay. I think that is it. Scrolling at the bottom, you know what to do. Talk to the author. He will direct you on what to do, what not to do. Again, know the seed. Know the seed. Know the seed. In the meantime and in between time, we'll catch up with you guys later today. Um, love you guys. I mean it. Really do. Appreciate it. Oh, by the way, I do have an update. I just haven't gotten the pictures yet because mom hasn't been able to send it to me. But Kurt's house is finished. It is done. It is built. He got the keys last week or early this week. Um, a nice, clean, put together, livable home. And he was a little bit emotional about it. Yes, 5 p.m. Eastern, uncommon, 5 p.m. Eastern. He was a little bit emotional about it. I have yet to talk to him. But they're now going to break down the old house. Now, I'm familiar with the house because when I was smaller, we used to hang out together in there with his dad, and I'm sure that it has some nostalgia to him, and it will be something hard for him to watch go away, because him losing his father, and then I can understand a little bit, but he's also very grateful because now he has a spot that he can actually leave his kid. When he needs to go to work, she'll be safe because he can actually lock the house. The simple things we take for granted. He can actually lock his house up and go to where he has to go to. So and I thank you guys for all your help, everyone who donated, everyone who helped, assisted. As soon as I get the pictures from mom, I'll give you a full update, show you everything, and might even try and call him live on the show and, have him talk to you guys. We'll see if he's willing to do that. So it was amazing. It was good to see the body actually do body work. It was really good. So appreciate it. So we'll catch you guys later today, 5 p.m. Eastern on Savage Patriots, and then at 8:30 Eastern on Too Strong. Wisdom calls to you from the street, so please, please, please find wisdom. Peace. Hold tight, dreams, for if dreams die.